Last week, James and I had a chance to sit down with one of our new customers who was interested in seeing how Populi handles financial aid from beginning to end. So we took a detailed look, took about an hour, the video is about an hour long, and we decided to record it so that we could make it available for others that wanted to be able to see that sort of detailed process using Populi to handle all their financial aid. And keep in mind, this version of Populi that you're going to be looking at has the COD integration enabled. And so this is for schools that want to be able to handle all of their financial aid through Populi. It is possible to use Populi in a different way. Some schools have other third-party software that they use, or they have a third-party servicer that they work with. So you might not have all of these features enabled, but for schools that are looking to handle everything on their own through Populi, this video should give you a good idea of what that looks like.
All right, James.
Super.
Take it away.
Perfect. Well, let me just go over kind of the big picture view of how Populi handles financial aid, and then we'll kind of jump in and see the particulars, which I think is what you're interested in.
Yeah.
So let's go over here to financial aid. So at the beginning of the year, as ICERs came in from SAG, once we connect to your SAG mailbox, you will actually automatically see aid applications come in on the ICERs page right here.
Okay.
And then you would step through those ICERs and import them. And the most important question we would ask you during that process is, what is the student's aid classification? So I don't know if you remember from last time, but in settings over here, aid classifications and aid year schedules are kind of the templates that Populi uses to apply COA, enrollment status, months, and then which components are supposed to show up on the student's aid application. So you can set up as many of these templates as you want. And then when a new ICER comes in automatically every day, then you would step through, select which aid classification you want for that student, and then that will create an aid application and kind of merge all the data from the ICER that we care about with all the template data that you told us about, because you said Jimmy is 3/4 time, first time student living on campus. And so that would determine his cost of attendance. So once those things kind of, sorry, go ahead. Is that a question?
Once an a year or classification is assigned, can we update it?
Yes. In fact, it's more of a template than it is a hard set in stone sort of thing. So I'm going to come to a random student on our demo site that somebody set up some aid. And then if I click edit on the application, the classification for this gentleman is none. If you selected it when you first saw his ICER, then it would be set and then the COA would have been filled in. But you see in this case, he just filled all the data in manually, and that's fine too. The classification is just kind of a one-time template, so we'll apply it once, but then you can modify whatever and tweak whatever you need to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so once the student has an aid application, that would include the cost of attendance that you told us about, as well as the EFC that came out on the ICER, which would allow us to calculate need. Then you would enter the kind of packaging mode for this student. One of the things we really want to have is auto packaging. We do not have that yet, just so you're aware. So you would have to, we do automatically calculate Pell Grant amounts, but that's not the same thing. So you would have to say add award for the Pell Grant, then the unsub loan, then the subsidized loan. And then someday I would love to have a very quick automated way to just package him all the way up to need, depending on his aid classification. But that's not there yet. So you do have to add a few awards. However, the dates for these awards, the disbursement dates and disbursement amounts can be automatically calculated for you, because if we go back to financial aid settings, the other kind of automation tool we have available right now is aid year schedules. And over here, you can say, all right, for all of my CAP award, or here, let's pick something that actually has it. for all my Grad Plus loans for this aid year, I want equal disbursement amounts on these terms on these dates,
Perfect.
right? And
Yep.
then you could apply it just to a particular type of aid classification. So you could have your unsub loans for your freshmen applied differently and scheduled differently from your upperclassmen, and that would be fine. So once you've added awards to the student, then we come to the origination step. Well, I suppose, let me back up here a minute. For starters, his aid application will be in setup, and then eventually you will work with him, and if he's in verification, you'll need to deal with that and work through him on that process. And Populi does provide some tools for that. For example, the student view here, this is what the student sees about his aid application. So it's kind of a summary. It breaks it down a bit into grants and loans. If you want him to be able to print an award letter, he can do that after the awards are taken out of kind of the preview mode and put into an offered mode. Then they show up on his award letter. But the student can actually add files here. And so he can add files and you can add files and you can talk to each other on this aid application. And so most people would use that for verification. So you would ask for documents, he would attach the documents, and they're all here. So once the student is done with any verification, then you would move his aid application status to completed. And then, so for example, let's see, let me just go ahead and do that. And now I would actually be able to start originating the awards that I've set up for him if those awards are in, let's see what this one is. So this is in setup. So this isn't it's not a real award yet. It's invisible to the student. But if I made this award offered, and then I made his aid application, let's say completed, then I will be able to actually go ahead and when you see the print award letter shows up, and I would be able to actually send this to COD. Also, if I go to the student's application view, because I moved it to a real application status, not just setup, which is invisible, then he can start asking questions. And he could also upload files like we talked about. So now let's pretend that we have the student, his aid application is all set up for the year. He's completed any verification, or you're happy with his verification status, he'll complete it later. You've offered him awards and he's accepted them through Populi. When he logs in, he will see a dashboard alert asking him to accept. I have a lot of alerts here. He won't have this many. He'll probably have just a couple about accepting the awards. Now, if it's a loan, he's allowed to downward adjust the amount. And then if it's a grant, then he can just kind of accept it or decline it.
So the students can adjust their own loan amount to their preference.
That's correct. Yeah, and we can. You can turn off that ability for most types anyway. But yeah, most people, I'll allow them to do that. Although some people would rather them talk to them first because there's other ramifications. So our customers are kind of split both ways on that. But okay, it is a possibility. So once the student has accepted the aid, then things start to get interesting. As I mentioned, we connect directly to your SAG mailbox. That's how we got the ICER here in the first place. And we do that by using some software that the Department of Education provides for servers. We would need you to fill out the COD routing ID, which we can help you find from a previous response, your OP ID, Pell ID, and then most importantly, your SAG mailbox and your SAG password. And this is kind of an odd password. I have to help people find it. It's the one that changes every 90 days, but it's not your typical login password. It's that there's only one password behind all the EdConnect login passwords. Mm-hmm. That's the actual mailbox password, and that's the one we need.
Okay.
So once you get that all set up, then...
So then quick question, since that has to be updated every 90 days, typically the prompt is when you're going into the SAG mailbox. Is there a way that notification happens, or are we just going to have to attempt to remember?
Yeah, for now you'll have to put it on your calendar and just set a reminder every 90 days. Eventually, for some clients that want Populi to manage everything, I would like to have a setting where Populi will just change it for you every 90 days and you won't even know it. Some people would be comfortable with that. Others are still using EdConnect to log in and download certain documents. Actually, this is probably a good rabbit trail. So let's go down a little rabbit trail here. One of the settings, which I can't change right now because it's a demo site, but it's the message class download filter. And this shows the different types of messages like ICERs or response to previous submission or entrance and exit counseling or MPN notification. And it says, all right, Populi, I only want you to download ICERs. I only want you to download these 3 types of files and leave everything else alone in my mailbox. So you can totally do that and then use EdConnect to download the rest of your things. You just have to be careful because if you accidentally download something through EdConnect, we can't see it. We check every 30 minutes. And if the file's gone, then you just have to remember to manually upload it over here in the SAG log. So this one page basically replaces EdConnect. You can upload files, you can send files. Once the integration's enabled, we'd have a send file option. And then we show every single file that we've ever downloaded from the SAG mailbox. And you can filter in that sort of thing. Now,
so like if you reports and stuff like that, will still be on here.
Right. And if we don't know what to do with it, Populi does not know. Well, I mean, some of the documents are really English. There's not a lot we can do with them. But for example, we don't do reconciliation. We don't automatically parse and handle reconciliation reports yet. So you might want to pull up the DOE provided tools for doing reconciliation and download the raw report and upload it to those tools. So if we don't know what to do with the file, we just hang on to it and let you download it and keep it around. But we don't automatically process it. Whereas if Populi does know, oh, this is a response to a submission that I sent to your SAG mailbox, then we'll automatically parse it out and try to do anything we can. So for example, if it's a entrance or exit counseling or an MPN notification, as long as we have one and only one student in the system with that social security number, we'll go ahead and automatically attach that to their profile. So next time you look at the student, you'll see, oh, they do have an MPN. Here's the ID. Here's the years it's good for, that sort of thing.
Perfect. So does the same thing happen with ICERs, or we're required to review every ICER file?
You are required to review every ICER file. And the reason for that is...
For the cost of a portion of it, right?
Yeah, sometimes, pretty often, if the ICER is changing, often there needs to be some action taken that Populi is not smart enough to do yet. For example, downward adjusting the awards, or the one kind of automation we have in there is if the C flag is set on the ICER, we'll automatically go through. Let me go back to another student here. Oh, she doesn't have an 8 application yet. But if the C flag is set on the ICER, then we'll automatically change the 8 application status to needs attention. And then that will actually prevent you from syncing anymore to COD until you go deal with it. So, but as far as the more detailed things, we do show you the codes. So we show you these codes came on the ICER. Here's what the Department of Education says they mean. But it would be up to you to actually take the appropriate action and do what the code says.
Beautiful.
Okay. So now let's go back to financial aid, DOE. These are the 2 award pages that you'd spend most of your time on. I mean, the SAG log, you would use that to find responses to your previous submissions. So, and this is the page that you actually submit things to COD. So for this page, I would say sync to COD. And unfortunately, I can't do that right now because all of my awards are not syncable. So in Populi, if Populi knows that there's a serious problem with this award, we won't even let you try to sync it. So let me go and let's see why this one is not syncable. Well, there's all sorts of reasons why this is not syncable. Let me see if I can find a better example here. No. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately in the demo site, I can't show you everything, but
really fun.
Yeah, in the production site right here, if there's a problem with the award, there's a button to, or a link, I think, to expand out any COD errors from the last time we attempted to sync, or COD errors that would prevent you from syncing in the first place. So it's basically a checklist of everything that's wrong with this award, either on Populi's side, for example, the student doesn't have a social security number. Obviously, we can't push that to COD, or the disbursements don't add up to the award total for a direct loan. We know that that's a problem, so we wouldn't let you sync. So you would go through that. You'd make sure that you have a SIP code, and you kind of go through the checklist until Populi is happy with it. Now, this doesn't mean that the Department of Education is happy with it, but as far as we know, it looks like legitimate data. So then you go here, and this would flip to unsynced, and it would turn gold instead of red. And then you would be allowed to check the box and say sync to COD. Now, you could check 50 awards or 1 award. When you click sync to COD, you'll get a little pop-up with a summary that says, okay, we're going to sync 3 Pell Grants, and they're worth a total of $30,000. That would be a big Pell Grant. But so we'll show you kind of what you're about to do. We'll give you one last chance to look at it, and then you can either download an XML file and then manually upload it to COD somehow through EdConnect, or you can just let us put it in mailbox for you. So most people would, if they're fully connected, like we're talking about, they'd say transmit directly over SAG. So then when I go here, I would see that we sent something to COD. This is a bidirectional log. It shows everything we sent, everything we received. And then in about half an hour or the next day, depending on how the government's feeling, then the response would come back and it would automatically attach to that submission. And then when you clicked it, you get a breakdown. It's kind of it's a nested data structure. So there's kind of a student chunk for every student, and that has a status of accepted or rejected. Then for every award that student has, there's an award chunk, and the award level could be accepted, rejected, or corrected. And then each disbursement could also be accepted, rejected, or corrected. One thing I would encourage you to do is to turn off corrections, because that actually makes it difficult for us to integrate with them. Because when they correct something, we can't always know what they corrected and adjust everything in Populi to make it match. So it's actually much nicer for using the integration if you just tell them to reject everything that they can't accept. And then Populi will have a very nice accepted or rejected. And then if it's rejected, we'll show you why they said it was rejected and what they say you should do about it. So it's kind of a rinse and repeat then. You'd go to this page, and let's say you've submitted 50 awards, 3 of them came back rejected, either at the student level, the award level, or maybe just one disbursement level. Those awards would say rejected. They'd also be red. And then the rest of those awards would say accepted. So and once they become accepted, we won't let you sync again unless you change something on the award. So that's what this little indicator shows. It shows that it needs sync to COD. So Populi keeps track of kind of the last thing we push to COD, and we compare that with the current state of the award. So if you go in there and edit the amount, Populi says, whoa, you changed the amount. COD needs to know about this. So we'll put that flag back on the award. But if you've pushed it across, it's been accepted, and you haven't changed anything, then this flag will go away, because we know that COD and Populi are in sync. Everybody's on the same page, same numbers, everybody's happy here. And then it's only until you edit something or it gets rejected that you need to sync again. So you'd work through your list at the beginning of the year. You'd originate. Some people choose to originate all their Pell Grants together. Some people just throw everything together, all award types, and do huge origination batches with hundreds of students at the beginning of the year. Either way is fine. All the rejected ones come back. You work with those. You might have to delete the award if there was a serious problem, or you would just more likely tweak the data and resubmit until COD is happy with it. So hopefully, and are you continuous enrollment or traditional calendar?
A little bit of both.
Okay, so from the traditional perspective, there's a big rush of origination at the beginning of the year. We encourage people to originate everything, because you can originate a Pell Grant. I don't believe it's required, but in our experience, we kind of encourage you through the system to just push everything as early as possible, and then get some feedback from the government on whether they're going to be okay with this or not. So we encourage people to originate everything, and then after a lot of work, a lot of tweaking, hopefully you have however many students you have or awards you have this year with all greens. Everything is accepted. And at this point, nothing has been released. So the COD released indicator on each of these disbursements is, well, on this one it's yes, but on these two it's no. Oh, and you'll notice that there's multiple disbursements inside this award. Each of these chunks is a single award, and then the disbursements are broken down within that. So now moving throughout the year, I imagine you probably already went through disbursement batches last time, but let me just go through this again. So in Populi, when it's disbursement time, you've already scheduled disbursement dates, and then you show up on Monday and you say, all right, grab all the disbursements that are supposed to be dispersed this week based on their scheduled date. So you make a batch from those. Again, some people do one batch per award type. Some people just blend it all together, all federal aid. And there's a batch total, and that's going to be important later when you go down to G5. So as you step through the batch, it's like a dance between the financial aid department and the student billing department. So you will do steps like authorization received. The billing department will do posted to student accounts and funds requested, funds received. So you're allowed to start that step, and that passes it off into their court, and the billing department has to complete that step. So we maintain the division of responsibilities or the separation of duties. So as part of this batch, we actually go through and we flip the released indicator for each disbursement in the batch to true. So as part of this process, at one point, we're back in this authorization requested step. When you started that step, we would actually, once the integration is all set up and in production, we'd actually stop you and we wouldn't let you go through to authorization received until COD has got back to us and says, every single award on here is, every single disbursement on here is released and accepted. And we do have an override. There's a few weird cases where sometimes you might need to force Populi to go ahead and advance the batch, but we really, really want you to not advance the batch until COD is happy with every single disbursement in this batch. Once it's been released, then you would kick it to your student billing and they would post it to student accounts. And if you want to go over how the accounting transactions work, I'm happy to do that. But basically, there's a liability account involved. So when you get money into your bank account from G5, you will make your bank account go up and make a matching liability go up. And then as you post to student accounts, that liability goes down and their accounts receivable balance goes down. So we kind of have this holding tank where I got $5,000 from G5, but I haven't applied it yet. So it's in my bank and it's in a liability. Then the student billing department posts to student accounts. Suddenly it's not a liability anymore, but these students owe me $5,000 less. Their accounts receivable went down by $5,000. So that's the short story of, sorry, go ahead.
Do you mind through that? Because I actually have my business office rep in here with us.
Okay, super. Yeah. Do you have any questions about how that works?
No, it makes sense to me, but I appreciate it. Is there any way you can kind of show us? So when you say, like you use terms like you'll kick it over to the student account, what does that look like on my side?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, right now we don't have, sorry, we don't have an automated way to do that. So you would basically, the financial aid department would get this batch authorized, the release indicator flipped to true, COD says they're all accepted, we're all happy with it. They can get it to this step, and then the financial aid department is not allowed to advance the batch any further. And then right now, unfortunately, I don't have an automated way to do this. So you would need to email your business office and say, all right, batch number 139 is ready to go. Or some people do just an automated thing where they check every day in the afternoon or something and post all the batches that are ready to go that day. Okay, whatever process you have, but eventually, yeah, it needs to be more automated. Now, when you post to student accounts, you also have the option to notify students by email that aid was posted to their account. And this is an editable template. You can go set up in settings. If you really don't want to do this, you can make it so it defaults to unchecked, and then we won't do it by default. But most people, I mean, I believe there is a requirement. So most people use Populi to notify students that a $1,000 Pell Grant has been dispersed to your account in January term. Please log into Populi and look on your profile's financial tab for more details. And then you can also change the posted date if that's necessary for this batch. So literally though, the student billing department will click complete batch, and then suddenly 500 transactions appear in the GL for each of the 500 awards that are in this batch. 500 disbursements, I should say, to be correct. And then on a student's profile, let me see. So now if I just go to the history, it would show up as an aid payment. So when I click that button, suddenly there's a aid payment applied to Spring, and then the student's financial dashboard would change because that aid payment might pay off some unpaid invoices and change their pay now amount and their balance. Does that kind of make sense?
It does kind of, yes. It'll be good to go through it.
Cool. Yeah, since I have your student billing person here, one thing Populi makes a big distinction of is the total balance and the pay now amount. That's a pretty important distinction because financial aid is just kind of an odd beast. Like it's not, and accounting systems don't track it very well, I think. So what we do is we share the total balance, and this is your GL balance. This is your AR balance. It's always correct. It's rock solid. It's the amount of money you owe the school. But it's definitely not the amount of money that you're probably going to be asked to pay the school. Because if I owe you $10,000 tuition, but I'm expecting $7,000 of aid, and then I have a payment plan that means that I can take the remaining $3,000 and spread it out over 6 months, the amount I'm supposed to pay the school now will often be a lot smaller than the total balance, which is the hard financial, like if no aid came in, I would be on the hook for this $10,000. But right now you're just asking me to pay $100 because I'm on a really generous payment plan or something like that. And all this expected aid is sitting there in the background. Populi knows that the financial aid department has said that this aid is going to come in, so we're not going to ask the student to pay it right now. So the pay now amount is what the student needs to pay right now. The balance is the actual AR balance. Any questions?
No, that's
If you could see the happy dances we were doing right now, you would know.
Good. I'm glad. No, I've been working for years to try to get, some people want to do everything in QuickBooks or another accounting system, and it's just really hard to represent aid. It's just it's kind of an odd dynamic because it shouldn't affect your AR yet, but you know that it will affect your AR down the road. Anyway, so back to financial aid. Let's see. So now we have, and then once you disperse it, then you'll see it's posted. And then like we saw, it's an actual financial transaction. I'll just go ahead and look at it. So if you jump here, the student can see this. It says, once it's applied to invoices, you can see what it paid off. And then there's an online receipts. And then if we jump down to the transaction, so invoices and payments and refunds are at this kind of higher level above your hardcore accounting level. And you can map them and unmap them because there's some flexibility there even after they're posted, because you might have accepted $100 payment and Populi applied it to the oldest invoice first, which is what we'll normally do, except if it's aid. And then we try to be smart about it. And we'll say, this invoice has half of it is not aid eligible. So we will not apply this aid payment to this invoice. We'll apply as much as we can. And then we're going to let the rest sit in limbo, waiting for aid eligible charges to come in. So you can end up with some interesting situations where the student actually has money to cover the invoice, but Populi will not cover the invoice because it's got charges that aren't aid eligible on it. But like I was saying, payments and refunds and invoices are operated at a level kind of above the ledger. And you can, if you need to, detach money from that was applied to an invoice and apply it to a different invoice. So suddenly an invoice that used to be paid because we took this $100 payment, a student payment or an aid payment, any type of payment, and we automatically applied it. But you might need to go back there and detach it from that invoice and attach it to another invoice. And you can do that after the transaction is posted. However, the underlying GL data never changes, right? The invoice has a transaction. Unless you void it, it's going to stay there forever. The payment has a transaction. It's got ledger entries. Those will never change. So there's kind of two levels of financial data going on here. So let me go back. So this page, the payment page, kind of shows the higher level, what it's applied to. This might change in future. Now, once we go down to the transaction level, this will never change. Let's go down to the detail. So for example, here's your chart of accounts receivable, asset, credit 260, and then liability account was debited 260. And this in real life would look more something like federal student aid liability account or something like that. I think most people use one liability account for all federal aid. You could use separate ones. Populi doesn't really care. You can track it however you want. Yeah, and actually, I think quite a few people do use separate ones, because then you can go into your chart of accounts and you can see, let me see if I can find a liability account. Because of the way we do it, you can see, oh, wait, I'm sitting on a bunch of money for the academic competitiveness grant that I haven't paid off yet, right? I owe this to students. It's a liability to my school. This needs to be zero. Once you fully complete that batch, this should drop to zero. Of course, this is the demo site, so everything's all messed up, and I wouldn't pay too much attention to the actual numbers. But the general idea is, when you receive money, you put a journal entry that puts the money into your bank account, corresponding liability account. When you post to student accounts, the liability drops off, and their AR drops down. So that is the general flow of the disbursement into Populi. Now, yeah, go ahead.
I was looking at this here for you. So I saw your SEOG, and it has like that balance, obviously. So if we set it up properly for that to be a liability account, we can put a starting balance, as in how much we have to spend that year, and track how much of it has been dispersed, correct?
Yeah, you can journal. It's just a normal account. So you can add a journal entry, an adjusting entry, and put whatever you want in there. That's correct.
Okay.
It's just going to reduce, it will reduce the liability account over time as you disperse funds. Actually, though, did you say work study or something else? Like, connection cut out just then.
Well, I mean, we have federal work study dollars and we have SEOG.
Okay. So work study is actually its own case. We handle the accounting for that completely different from all other aid because it's special.
Special.
Yes, very special. So we actually don't involve a liability account then. And
okay.
I'd have to look up the details of how we do that, actually, because I know it's convoluted. But we have a workflow for doing that, because it doesn't quite track with the liability account. Really isn't necessary, I don't think.
Okay.
But everything else, that's kind of a hard-coded exception for work study. You can just use the built-in work study type and you get that functionality. If you want to, though, you can create your own work study type and use that instead and ignore the built-in. And then you can have the standard functionality with the liability account. So you can kind of pick which road you want to go down there.
Okay.
Any more questions before we jump back into refunds?
No.
Okay. So let's go back to someone with an award. Now let's say that for some reason, this student, let's pretend this is posted, and this student lost some aid for some reason. He switched to half-time prior to halfway through the term, and you need to send some money back. Well, I can't do that here. I need to find an actual posted one. There we go. Okay, so because I have posted transactions here, I now have a refund source option. So it's going to let me refund the amount of money that I have received from this aid source from the government for a Pell Grant. It would let me over refund, since there are some cases where, yes, I've already paid out the money to the student, but the government really, really wants it back, and I just need to give it back, and then I'll collect it from the student. So we do handle some weird edge cases like that. So when Billy here went to pay his bill, he wouldn't have an invoice that said he owed you money, but he would have a special line item on the payment page that says, you owe them $1,000 because you got $1,000 of aid that then went back to the government and the school was never reimbursed for that. So it's kind of a weird exception. It's one of the very few ways in Populi that the student owes you money without an invoice. So, so we do allow overwards, but in general, you would be refunding the amount that less than the amount of the original disbursements, less the amount that you've already paid out to the student. So if I said, let's see if it'll let me do this. I'm going to add a refund to source. Here we go, for $100. And then when I went to refund credit balance, I can select here federal aid, non-federal aid, Pell Grant. Now, some colleges, you're not Canadian, right? You are a U.S. institution?
I'm about as far from Canada
Okay.
as you can get.
Right?
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I should have done more homework.
We are not from Canada.
Okay, excellent. We have a lot of Canadian clients for some reason, actually. We're pretty close to Canada ourselves. But
How often do they say, hey?
Yeah, we heard some of that. So some schools would actually set up Populi to allow commingled refunds. I would not recommend that if you're a U.S. institution and you want to keep track of stuff for auditors, which everybody does. It's much nicer if you owe Jimmy or who is this? Bobby? So Billy. There we go. So we owe Billy $1,000 or something. It's much nicer to cut him 2 separate refund checks, one for the amount of money that he overpaid, and then one for the amount of money that the government overpaid. And this will make auditing much nicer because then you will have a separate refund check that is just federal dollars being paid out to the student, right? And then if you get Billy's permission, you could hang on to that money and then apply it to charges that come in on the next term. So here, let's go to the by term section. Every term has its own summary page here that shows charges, financial aid. I'm not sure if it actually has any. Let's see if I can find an invoice on this account. There we go. So, oops, what term was that? Fall 2018. Let me see if I can find you some data here. Whoops. So fall 2018. There we go. Here's some data. So by default, Populi will not allow aid payments to apply to charges outside of the term for which that disbursement is assigned. However, if you wanted to, if you had an understanding with Billy, you could manually force the aid payment to cross term boundaries and pay off invoices in his next term. But we won't do that by default. And there is a setting you can change that behavior if you choose. But that's one way we try to protect you from violating the regulations in various ways. Okay, so let's say that I added a refund back to the source for $100. The process of dispersing that is pretty much the inverse of the normal disbursement process. So I'd say new disbursement batch, but instead of a batch type disbursement, I would say batch type refund to source. And I think it was set up. So I left it as set up. I should have changed the status so it would show up here. But here's, let's see, let me just pick one for now. So it's a much smaller series of steps, but it's the same page. You should be familiar with it. It's the same dance between the aid office and the student billing office. So you would go through here and basically we would be resyncing to COD with a lower amount. And then once COD accepts it, then you'd post it to the student's account and you would log into G5 and return the batch total up here. So that's the refund to source or return to source process. We don't do return to source calculations. You would be on your own for coming up with how much you're supposed to return to source. But you could put, if you need to return 5 different award types for Simon here, they can all be in the same batch and be one G5 transaction. Or you could have 50 students in the batch and just do it once every couple of days.
Perfect. So this is like if you have your R2T4s, your students don't attend type of a thing and you just need to send it back. Let me just make sure, you refund it to the source, you sync it to COD, once the response comes back, then you do that close batch process.
Right, and then it would be posted to the students' accounts. Now, refunds are kind of tricky. So when a refund comes on the scene, it looks for a payment to, like we talked about, there's 2 levels. So at the accounting transaction or the GL level, refunds are super easy, right? They're just kind of the inverse of a payment. Nothing to see there. At the kind of invoice refund payment level, then things get tricky because the refund will actually reduce the amount available on a previous payment. So Jimmy sent a payment for $1,000. You just refunded back $100 to the source. So that payment will be the amount that he can apply will be reduced by $100. But what if it's already been applied to an invoice and paid off a $100 invoice? Well, we will actually go track down that invoice, resurrect it, and say, nope, it's not paid anymore because the $100 that you used to pay it off got sent back to the government. So sorry, Billy, or Simon in this case, you owe us $100. So when Simon logs in, he will see that charge, that invoice that he thought he paid off. It's not paid off anymore because that money that we thought we had to send back to the source. So we try to keep everything matched up so that we're showing the student, what are we asking you to pay for? So normally that's an invoice. And then in the one weird case where you refund more than you actually should have to the government, then we'll just show a special little one-off message and say, hey, Simon, you owe the school some money because of an over refund situation. So that's how that shows up for the student. And that pretty much closes out the general workflow. And then at the end of the year, of course, we would help you with your FIS app. So we would break that down for you. And then, what now?
I might cry of tears of joy right now.
I'm glad. That's awesome.
Okay.
Super. And then this is the academic progress report. Now, I don't know, for continuous enrollment schools, it's sometimes not as helpful as I would like it to be. But for your traditional population, it should be super helpful. So it shows for every student enrolled in this particular term, it shows whether they have ever attended classes. If they did, it'll show their last day of attendance. It'll show their cumulative GPA with transfer, with cumulative attempted units with transfer, and and their completion percentage. So this should help you with the aid of this filter here. This should help you target students who are having completion issues, who are not making academic progress. And I should mention SAP. We do, and again, non-traditional students are a little trickier, but we do offer SAP calculation, which we can certainly talk about and see if it would be useful to you. So I can say add SAP policy, and I can say it's for a particular program, and I can set all these minimum GPAs, minimum granted, this is their completion percentage basically, and this is their GPA. And then you can pick what you want to do when someone violates this. So you can say immediately suspend them, or you can warn them, or you can put them in some sort of bucket of people you need to talk to, and you can figure.
TP2 warning suspension. That means that after they fail SAP for the first time, they go on warning, and then the second time they go to suspension, right, for a consecutive period.
Right, and Populi is smart enough to, when it calculates SAP for a term, if it's something like this, then it'll look back at their previous satisfactory academic progress for the previous term, and then get serious and suspend them. So yeah, it takes into account historic data when it's calculating what status to put them in this particular term. It'll look at historic data to calculate that. Okay, let's see here. Oh, as far as where you would see that, and then let's see here. And then you can do some basic filtering on COA and EFC and that sort of thing. But then I think the primary place you'd be filtering on SAP would be on your academic progress report. So once a term, you could go in here and say, if Populi is able to do a good enough job with all your students, hopefully continuous enrollment, et cetera, because typically you'd have them in a different program, so it would be possible to set up a different completion. Although if it's like borrower-based stuff, then I don't guarantee it being terribly useful yet. We are working on payment periods, and I can talk to you about, they're not generally available, but we have several clients using them in beta, and we could certainly see if you guys would be a good fit for that. Because then we can actually calculate a proper satisfactory academic progress for your non-traditional students. So we are definitely working on it, and we're pretty close.
That's because we do SAY and BBay. So is your system BBay accessible? I mean, I obviously know it's a lot more manual on that part.
Yeah, it is. So one of the features that we can enable for you that's kind of in beta is Populi will automatically calculate payment periods. So as you say, you'll set up a payment period definition and say, all right, once you fill up 13 credits, that's the end of that payment period. You're done. If your student enrolls again, you need to start a new payment period for him with the start date of that new course as his payment period start date. So we can actually do that for you. And the benefit there then is you'd use your BBay, you'd set up your BBay programs that way, and you'd set up your traditional programs to use terms. And then on the academic progress report, there's a separate academic progress report, I believe, for the non-traditional students. So this report looks at terms, that report looks at payment periods, and those are, of course, all over the map. I mean, it can be totally individual. But you're then able to calculate SAP, and it's working pretty well with the clients that I'm working with, I believe. So we're getting pretty close to be able to automatically calculate SAP for traditional students and continuous enrollment students. So then every term for traditional students, you'd show up here and you could check their SAP status and then send them an Instagram or whatever you need to do, if there's a problem. So you can, from a lot of places in Populi, you can make a one-time mailing list with one recipient in this case, and then you could send them an email or take other actions here. Like text them or apply discipline or that sort of thing. You could actually, you could apply.
Did I see this have an option too to create an organization that you can email the same thing to that particular set of people that are in that organization?
Are we talking financial or donations or what? Sorry, what's the?
Thinking in general, like if I have a set of students that are on a particular scholarship or something, and they need to write a thank you letter, let's say, I could create them in an organization or in a group and email them all the same information at once.
Yeah, except in Populi, we'd call that a tag. Groups are something different. I mean, you could put them in a group, but for us, groups are more like chess club or study groups. They're actual, if you're a member of a group, you can log in and interact with other members of the group, which is probably not what you want in this case. So in Populi, you can apply as many tags as you like to a student. So I can say needs thank you. And then I can click this and I can see 100 students or however many there are that need a thank you letter. And I can tag and untag them all easily. And then I can export them, email them, text them, print address labels, apply a communication plan, or export ID cards. So for you, it would be emailing or texting, I would imagine. But yeah, so you can slice and dice. A tag is just like a sticky note. You can stick it on whatever students you want, grab them all, and then bulk communicate with them.
We need to just remember whatever we name that particular tag.
Yeah. And there's also. Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's also custom fields. But what were you saying?
So custom tags. So you would edit tag, type in the information, and then if you click on that hyperlink, it'll show you which student tag is that. I don't think you understand the utter joy that you're bringing us. Right?
That's great.
All right. Student leader.
I was honestly a little worried because I know Power Fades is capable. I've heard really good things about them, and I know they're capable of a lot more automation in some areas than we are. So I want to make it very clear that it is a lot of manual work in Populi, and we do try to help you, and we are improving, but we
So,
definitely are not quite to the same level.
yeah, a little backstory on me. I came in having never used it, and there was no one to train me, so I did a lot of things manual in PowerFace, but probably did not use it to its full extent. But the
Uh-huh.
system that we've gone through in the interim between PowerFace and Genzabar to hopefully moving over into your guys' realm, or moving over into your guys' realm, didn't do anything for us.
Oh,
So when we're like giggling and giddy about things, it's because we're comparing what we have had to deal with for the last 6-7 months to what we can now do that we've been attempting to ask them to build for us. So
okay.
yeah, I'm okay with. I mean, when I said, okay, so let me just make sure I understand this. I'm gonna have to like manually for each student add each award and dollar amount. Okay, that's gonna take a little bit of time, but it could be a whole lot worse. I'm not gonna lie.
Super. And that's definitely on my hit list. Like we hired a full-time financial developer. We're definitely investing in this area. We want to make it better. So in 5 years, I'm sure we'll be in a much better place.
What about in 5 minutes? No,
maybe not in 5 minutes. Nobody wants to mess up their financial stuff. We have to be super careful and test everything, and it takes a long time to develop, but it's worth it.
Do your own testing.
Let me show you custom fields while I have you on the phone, because I think tags are nice, but the other thing you can do is in each kind of module, for lack of a better word, in each area of Populi, the financial aid, the general person area, you can set up custom fields, and let's see, choose a custom field. So your school can have all sorts of custom fields with different data types, and then you can attach this to different students. Custom fields can be, a text area, or a file, or a short string, a multiple choice. So you can, if tags are not quite flexible enough for you, if just the sticky note thing isn't doing it, then you can set up, 5 different options, and then, or a date field. So you can attach all sorts of such things to students and then make them only accessible to financial people or financial aid people or academic people. And then,
Could this be for FERPA?
Pardon?
Could this be used for FERPA?
Yeah. So you could certainly, you could say, okay, I'm going to create this as a financial field because I really don't need my academic people seeing it. And then they won't be able to see it unless they have the financial or financial aid role or whatever role is appropriate. I'm showing you the general custom fields, but on the student's financial profile, you can also have custom fields here. So these are financial custom fields, and the academic folks and generic staff folks cannot see these. They can be term by term. They can have one value per term. They can just have one value, but they can be all different data types. And they can be fairly easily reported on and exported, and you can email everyone with a custom field of value of this for their denomination or their, you can just set up whatever you want and then slice and dice it and email people based on this custom field. And as long as you set them up correctly as the correct type of custom field, then nobody other than financial people can see it. So tags are nice, but they are a little more public, like staff can see tags. Custom fields can be restricted to just financial types.
And you said that each kind of area, so like admissions, academic, finance, all have their own ability for custom fields, right?
Correct. Cool. Yeah. So if I have all the roles right now, pretty much, because I'm doing a demo, so I can see everything, but these custom fields would not be visible to you unless you had, well, actually, we may show the admissions custom fields to financial people just because they often have a good interest, a vested interest in knowing all those sorts of things about the applicant. But if I were, say, just a professor, then no, I could not see this tab or any of the custom fields. Okay, I'm trying to think if there's anything we didn't cover.
Can I come back? If we go into the regular settings, I just want to make sure for cost of attendance, because I know that your list looked much larger than mine, and that was the one area, the aid classification.
Okay.
So ideally, I can make unlimited amounts of this, and I just have to assign it to each student individually, is what you're saying.
You have to apply it to each student individually the very first time you see them. So once it's on them, then it's sticky. It's not like every time you see an ICER, you have to reapply it. But the first time we see a brand new social security number, or he might be already in the system, but we don't know what aid classification, we'll ask you, and then we'll template down all the data and then leave it alone. One project we are working on right now, there was recently some guidance sent out from the DOE about aid letters are not supposed to, or offer letters are not supposed to be called offer letters anymore, apparently. And
award.
there we go. Award letters are not supposed to be called award letters, and you're supposed to show a breakout of the cost of attendance. So one of our developers at this moment is busy adding the ability to break out cost of attendance on aid classifications, and that will trickle down to individual students' aid applications. And then that will trickle down to the award letter, so which will not be called the award letter anymore. So we're working on that, and that'll be done.
So then I see, obviously, with your components, like we have your FAFSA, your master promissory note, blah, blah, blah. With verification, if a student's not selected for verification, then that's just a component that's not shown. How does that work?
Yeah. Typically, so this is more like a checklist. It's not terribly, the aid application is not terribly, it's really a checklist that's visible to you and the student is all it is. Most people would leave verification off and just add it to students, because you can manually, let me grab a student here so we can talk about them. I can go into Omer's application and he has all of them, but I can check which ones he does and doesn't have, and he will only see the ones that I say he has, and I can have instructions for each one. This ever loads. So he can view instructions for each one, but you can say Omar needs verification step because because they asked for verification, but that's not in my normal aid classification template because most people don't need it, sort of thing. So yeah, people handle that different ways.
Okay.
I have a question for you. When you say the student can see this, can they see this through the Populi app on their phones?
They can see some of it. So they can see the app mostly at this point shows them the dashboard. And I will have to check. We're doing a bunch of work on the app. And I'm not sure what we're going to be showing in future. I'd have to check and get back to you on that, like what's going to be available in the next month or two. But right now, the main purpose of the app for the student view is to show their pay now amount and let them pay with a credit card. That's and then I would have to check into exactly how much detail we would show.
But for the moment, it's a subset. It's not the full detail on the app.
Yeah, let me check. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think we show very much data at all. But that's one of those things. We're developing the app. Right now, we're working on lessons and tests. So that's a huge project because we do want students to take tests on the app. And yeah, it's definitely under active development. But yeah, I don't think, because eventually it would be really nice for students to be able to accept financial aid on the app. And I know that's not possible yet.
Okay. So then question, I know, back to something you said originally, you said that master promissory notes and entrance counseling, you can like auto match them as long as the social's in the system. Where would I see that on a student account?
Oh, sure. So if I go to financial aid here, the financial aid page is rendered for a particular award year.
Okay.
And if I got an MPN, sorry, I can't see it because it's in the demo mode, but there's basically just two more chunks down here that says counselings, and a row would show up under counselings automatically when we download it from SAG, and you could click on it and see the ID, and it would just show like, is this entrance counseling, exit counseling, is it plus counseling? It would show the type, and then you could click on it and see the details. MPN notifications would show up here as well. Okay. And the one funny thing about MPNs is because they can carry forward for 10 years, I think. We do actually show old NPNs. So even though I'm looking at aid year 2018-19, if I had an NPN that was not a single award NPN, then it would actually carry through and I'd be able to see it in this aid year, even though I actually received it in a previous aid year. So we show, and that's important though, because one of those kind of validation checks that I talked about was we'll let you originate an award, a loan, sorry. We'll let you originate a direct loan without an NPN, but we will not let you disperse that loan without an NPN on file. So it sometimes trips people up because we let you push it and you got accepted and everything's cool. And then you go to disperse it and suddenly Populi is like, whoa, we can't disperse this because we don't have an NPN on file. But if you have hooked everything up automatically, we really should have an NPN on file because it should have flowed in from your mailbox. But during transition and stuff, there's always a gap because we just don't have, the ICERs we need. We don't have the NPNs and the counselings we need. But those things or their absence are definitely baked into the logic that if we know something's wrong like that, we won't even let you try to sync to COD because we're trying to help you reduce errors. We're trying to only sync things to COD that really have a pretty good chance or look like they have a good chance of being accepted. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Well,
I have one question when you were talking about your the ICERs, the aid applications when they come in.
Yeah.
I've dropped a couple of files into our system so I already can kind of see what they look like. And I know there's an option to create a lead or link it to someone.
Yeah.
If we have a student that's in like a lead or an application status and we have their social on file, do I still have to manually search each student, or does your system have the logic to read that social's in the system and put that into a linking status?
Right. So the very first ICER that you import will, you'll pick the ADAP classification. The very first ICER that you import for the student, you might create a new profile, give them over to admissions to go work on. All subsequent ICERs, as long as nothing weird happens, will just automatically link to the student, and we'll never ask you to do that again. We'll never ask for the aid classification again or to create a new student profile. The one situation where things would get weird are if you edited, or if someone edited the social security number, then that would break the linkage. We couldn't find them anymore. Or if you added duplicate students. So if we have more than one student with the same social, then Populi throws up its hands and says, I'm sorry, I don't know which of these students. You probably shouldn't have too many students with the same social in the system though. So typically people
is for that first initial ICER. So say we have a student that's already applied and maybe they haven't filled out their ICER yet, and we receive the ICER after they're already in the system.
Right.
Do we have to search each individual student, or does the system do that link for us because the social's already there? Not the subsequent, just the initial.
Oh yeah, no, if the social's there, then that's good. The link is there. Now, if the social's not there, what we'll do is we'll auto-suggest. So if you have a John Smith ICER come in, we've never seen the social before. We will go look up all John Smiths that we can find and say, is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one? So we don't make you manually search for it. We have a list of options, and then you can click on them and look and see, okay, maybe this is nope, this isn't the right one. And if it's an uncommon name, then it's usually pretty obvious. Yeah. So we auto-suggest, we do the best we can, but you do have to decide at the end of the day whether this is the same John Smith or a different John Smith.
Perfect.
And we match on address and phone number and that sort of thing too.
Awesome. That's amazing. I don't think you understand how much you have made my day today.
Perfect. That's what we like to hear. Any more questions?
Well, I'm sure there will be at some point, but
I'm sure once we start actually getting into, because they're working on getting our active students imported currently. So I'm sure that once we actually have students to work with, there might be some tickets back and forth just to clarify. But I think you've given us a pretty good understanding of where to go and how to get everything started.
Perfect. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, we were saying just thank you so much.
Okay, no worries. As far as transition goes, that is one thing we probably should talk about at some point. It probably is kind of moot until we know that your academic data and your students are close to being imported. But the rockiest part of the integration is getting it started, because we don't have, the ICERs we need to submit. And also, if we, every direct loan, for example, has a uniquely generated direct loan ID. The problem
Right.
is, if Populi says, oh, here's a direct loan for $1,000, if we don't have that exact same ID, we will actually push a new direct loan, a second one, for Jimmy's student into COD. And that's bad, because so there's definitely some issues at first trying to get your data zipped up. The easiest thing to do, of course, is to not use Populi for awards that you've already originated in some other system, and just start fresh and be like, all right, I'm going to deal with those old awards in this other system. And well, July is coming up. So, I'm going to do all
Originated
next
anything.
year in Populi. I'm going to do that into my previous system. Or you can decide, no, I'm just going to go for it. But then, just to be aware, I definitely can pretty much guarantee that you'll need to keep a very tight rein on COD. I mean, you'll need to be on the COD website a lot, because no matter how good we try to be, we will accidentally duplicate awards and disbursements because we don't have the right sequence numbers. And also there'll be a ton of rejections, because once a disbursement is released in COD, you have to have an incrementing sequence number. So if I push to COD the same sequence number that's already there, they'll reject it. And the problem is, we start out not knowing any of the sequence numbers for your awards in COD. So yeah, it's definitely, it's pretty hairy trying to take over an award that another system originated, but we can certainly do our best. I just want to not oversell us here. There will definitely be some pain in any sort of transition, but once it gets working, it tends to work pretty well.
Well, the good thing is that we haven't originated anything out of the old system, because they don't have an import-export process. So that's most likely not going to be a huge issue, but I'm not expecting everything to be perfect. So,
So Populi wouldn't need to take over. So say you originate a direct loan with 3 disbursements. So you wouldn't need Populi to take over and disperse that third disbursement. Like, you could do that in the other system and then just kind of record that in Populi. Perfect. Okay, that's great. Yeah, the cleanest thing we can do is have Populi generate those IDs, generate the sequence numbers, then we know they're right, and then we push it over, and pretty much the only errors we should get back are legitimate errors, like this student is a convict, or the wrong social, or things like that nature. So yeah, the cleaner we can make it, the less hassle there'll be for you guys. But and we will need you at some point to go to the ICER Data Mart and pull ICERs for all of your existing students that we know about for next year. And then we can upload those into Populi, so we know we have an ICER on file, and that'll create 8 applications for all of your current people.
Okay. Since we've been having to just like manually import the data, because our stake is on a virtual machine, so we import our information right now into a shared drive to then import it into the system. So we have all of the files kind of already set separately. So we can be able to just kind of basically re-import the information
on an as-needed basis for each student. Yep. Yeah, you could totally do that, or you could just blast them all. You'd have to step through 500 ICERs, which might not be the most fun thing in the world. But yeah, either way, whatever works. The one thing I would say about doing the one-off approach is you would definitely want to make sure you find the most recent one. Because when we do push anything to COD, we have to tell them the most recent CPS transaction number. If that's wrong, they'll reject it.
Okay. No problem.
Cool.
So ideally, what I could really do is that once we get our current student data into Populi, I could ideally drop all of the ICERs and link to any students that we have in there, and then create new leads for anybody that doesn't have a social in the system yet, correct?
Yeah, I think, and I'm sorry, I don't have access to COD. I'm just a developer, not a financial aid person. But I've heard from several of my clients that the ICER Data Mart thing is pretty easy to use. You just go in there and you say, hey, show me, and they'll give you some filter conditions, and they give you one huge ICER file. So you can just kind of pare it down as much as you can, and then just work through Populi and import 100 ICERs at a time or whatever, and get them all done. And that will give you the most recent one, which is nice, because it's going to give you the most recent ICER for every student.
Perfect.
And then we'll just need to worry about making sure that our, I'll work with you to, once we get your financial information entered, for example, your, where do we go? We'll need you to fill in this section, not your SIG mailbox and password for starters, but we will need this stuff because the DOE, the direct loan IDs are generated using your OPE ID and such. So we'll need to make sure those are in there, and then you can let me know, and we can go through and kind of backfill all IDs and take our best guess at all the awards that you have in the system.
I don't have that DOE integration option yet for our setup. Is that something that you guys can set up for me?
Yeah, for sure. We can do that. That would be a customer service thing. So I can talk to customer service, or Isaac can, and we can turn it on.
Send in a support request and we can enable it for you.
Okay, I'll submit a request for you today.
Great.
Perfect. And the COD routing ID is a bit tricky to find, but it's if you look at any COD response, it's kind of like in the header, there's a mailbox, kind of a destination and source. It's an 8-digit number. And if you need any help finding any of these numbers, just let me know.
Is that in a CSV file or the HTML file?
In the XML file, yeah, it's at the top. There's always usually there's 2 mailboxes involved in every transaction. There's a source and a destination, and one of those will be like 0000001, and that's COD's mailbox number, and the other mailbox number is yours.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's also, I believe, if you log in, there's like an info. I've been told that there's an info link next to your institution's logo, and you can click it and see all your IDs. Some people say that works. Other people can't seem to find it. But anyway, we'll just need to get all these settings filled in, and there we go.
Okay, so you need the routing. Okay, so you said the one with all the zeros and one, and then the other one is our school routing ID.
Correct.
Guess what? Got it. I'm like, when you said XML, I'm like, I know what you're talking about.
That was fast. I think that's a record actually it's been a multi-hour process for some folks.
I had to work with partially for a developer when we helped this other company to build like an ICER import, and they are working on like a COD import. And so we went through an XML file. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I think I remember where that stuff is. So
Nice. Alrighty, well, if that's it, I will let you go. But thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to working with you guys and trying to pull off a successful integration here.
awesome. Thank you so much. You've been so incredibly helpful.